we have a little extra entertainment today. We have an interview with Dougie with that weirdo Andrew Thien, who blocked me a long time ago because I had the nerve to defend Keith Davis. And Thien's been terrible anyway. The Oregonian's crap. All right, so let's hear what Dougie. This is mainstream media, and the Oregonian is kind of a right-wing publication, anti-union. Does not represent the views of Portland, that's for sure. But somehow they are the major newspaper. I don't know anybody that actually cares about what they think. But let's hear what the big shot from Canada has to say here. I know Real Rip City made 10 minutes before he got sick of it. Okay, let's see.
A pandemic, months of racial justice protests, and devastating fires haven't stopped TriMet's buses and trains from running. But where does the transit agency go from here? I'm Andrew Thien, and this is Beat Check with you, Oregonian. Up next, a conversation with TriMet General Manager Doug Kelsey about this challenging year.
Why don't you have a conversation with me, Dougie? Okay, somebody who actually can give you some good questions.
How it's affected his agency and staff, the future of public transit.
Did you hear how he said his agency? It's not his agency. It's our agency. But we live in this corrupt system that turns over all the public utilities over to like one ruler. You know, he gets to rule it. We don't have any say in how it's ruled either. None. Zero. Absolutely none. I don't care what Ozzy Gonzalez says. The riders and the drivers and the public has no choice over what TriMet does.
And why he says TriMet needs another federal stimulus infusion. We talked about whether TriMet's future is with buses or light rail. Why Vancouver...
Why do they need it? What have they lost? Okay, their fares were 13% of their operating budget. Last time I looked at the last year's budget, it was $200 million. So how much do they actually need to make up for that? They got enough money out of the CARES Act to do that, but we don't know what they did with that money, do we? Because they don't have to tell us. I mean, every public transit agency is pleading poverty here. And maybe some of them have a valid case, as in MTA, where half of the operating budget does actually come from fares. But TriMet is such a small part of its budget anyway, that what's the big deal? I mean, here they are asking for $5 billion to build a light rail line, okay, from the public. But here they want a federal bailout. Okay, you can already see immediately. We don't have to start this at all, because immediately you can see the obstruction of truth. Why are they asking for a light rail line when they could ask for the bailout from the voters, which they could probably get pretty easily? We need $200 million a year to run our buses the way they were. But that's not what they're asking for. They're asking the voters to approve a pork barrel when they need operating capital. So, I mean, we already know this is fake immediately. I'm not 34 seconds into this, and I'm already pissed off because it's already built the false premise.
British Columbia has a greater share of transit riders and much more. Here's our conversation.
Isn't that music?
Doug Kelsey, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your mood like right now? You're leading this, very important transit agency through first a pandemic and now wildfires here. We're talking in late September, but it's been I would imagine, a pretty challenging year to be in charge of TriMet.
You know, it really has. We all go through different experiences in our lives, and I've done multiple Olympic Games, and this is right up there. I got to tell you, it's when you start to look at COVID.
What is a guy who's managed Olympic Games doing as the head guy of fucking TriMet? I mean,
the impacts on the economy, riots, protests, the fires we've all gone through. It's been a real tumultuous time for. I'm not worried about me. I'm more worried about my employees and
You should be,
and they've been.
and you should be giving them a bonus, which you're not. It's not in the contract, so I don't have to do it. It took you. You're a year late with your bus barriers, and look, I don't want to get started already.
Absolutely up to the challenge, but I think we all know it takes a toll.
It takes a
But
toll
we're
on them.
we're adaptable human beings, and we will get through this.
Oh, God.
And we are getting through it, as we're seeing. It doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, a lot of folks have the luxury, I guess, of being able to work remotely. But when you're, operating the bus, both you and I ride the Line 35, right? You can't.
Yeah, we do.
You can't just sit at home or work from your kitchen.
Yeah, they have a mobile office, but it's not just our bus operators. Their heroism is amazing. We are an essential service, Andrew, and we need to get people who are doctors and nurses and cleaners to do their essential service. And so, we have to be up to that task, and our operators are doing an amazing job. Our cleaners are, our mechanics. We often forget about all the people who are out there doing safety and security, as well as also repairing tracks and signals. So there's a whole spectrum of people that are just really taking the challenge here, and it is absolutely not easy. And we're so grateful. We have so many great people.
Do you get a sense of what the mood is like from those essential workers, be it, the folks who are engineers keeping everything running, or the operators? Because we are, more than 6 months into a very challenging year.
I think it does take a toll. And we also can't forget all the people that they go home to. This doesn't just stop at work. And so it's been a challenge on morale. It's been a challenge on getting up every day. I try and get up every day. I put my work boots on every day too. It's been long hours for every one of us playing different roles. The courage, the heroism of everybody getting up every day when they're tired and taking another shift is to be applauded. It's not easy, but it's what we do, and the results show that the team is really good at it.
Now, we're talking, like I said, in late September, but the union workforce that makes TriMet go is operating on a contract that, has been extended right from last November. Does that add to some of the tension, do you think, in terms of?
No, it has not been extended. All the health care increase costs have been passed on to the operators and the retirees, which is basically a cut in my retirement check and a cut in the current operator's paycheck. You didn't even pay that. You hack. Okay? If he cared at all about people, he could have at least absorbed the insurance increases. But he didn't do that. He made us pay. This is what McFarland did. McFarland used the same unethical tactics on the union members.
Not only is it a pandemic and
this guy's going to make $400,000 this year, and he won't pay the increased cost for our health insurance.
Fires and everything else, but there's also a labor disagreement.
Yeah, I think I'm always optimistic, and through labor negotiations, there are a lot of challenges and tensions that come at the table, not just at TriMet's collective agreements, but everywhere. So yes, you could put that into the mix as well for some people, and so particularly.
Yeah, TriMet right now wants to outsource a lot of the mechanics functions. See, the whole move of the neoliberal, which started with Reagan and has been happening since, Democrat or Republican leaders, doesn't matter who they are, they're both the same. Their entire efforts have been focused on making sure they can get profit out of all public services. And every time they contract out something, that means government tax money makes profit for somebody. These are the neoliberal cannibals that are running everything. they serve the elites. Okay, and the contract right now is at an impasse because of stuff with mechanics. And they've been after them for a long time. They want the whole mechanic thing contracted out. They want all of it contracted out in reality. But they know they can't really do that right now. So they're just doing what they've been doing all along. They slowly, over time, degrade every component of the union contract so that eventually the idea is to privatize everything. And privatization is one of the big frauds of our times. There is no savings in privatization. It doesn't increase services. There's plenty of research about it. The only thing privatization does do is take some of that tax money and make sure it ends up in the pockets of the elites. That's what it does. That's the only purpose it serves. And he as a career technocrat, serves that interest. Let's call him back.
Particularly overlay the economy. These are challenging times. All
Excuse me, I'm gonna
combined
have to call you
together,
back.
it's you kind of take a breath when you take each one and list it out. But then if you put them all together, it adds to the mix, and it impacts everybody differently.
When was the last time you were on a bus or train?
Last week.
What's the experience like? Because I am one of those folks who I'm not going to an office, and so I'm not transiting anywhere. Tell people what it's like.
Oh, you mean Andrew Steen is an elite? Yeah.
Riding a bus or train right now.
Well, I think if you look at our ridership, the ridership is way down.
Oh, shit.
I think people are minding their business. They're really doing a good job creating their space. And not only was on taking transit, frankly, last Friday, I was, we did a large project, Andrew, on the Steel Bridge recently for about a month. And
more capital projects.
With many others. I did
now
5
they're doing
shifts.
more. They're closing Gresham now. I mean, the capital projects, 0 cuts for that. And right out there's another prima facie example of the hypocrisy and lies. No cuts there, service cuts here. Okay, it's just systemic. It's everywhere you look. They lie about everything. Everything is a lie that comes out of his mouth, Trump's mouth, Brown's mouth, Wheeler's mouth. Every one of them are liars.
People's demeanor was pretty good. The ridership is significantly down, and so that allows for more spacing. But the general mood is reasonable, and people are going about their business. So we are seeing a slight uptick in ridership currently, but it's still pretty fragile. But there's a lot of space out there on those buses and trains.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about ridership because right before...
obviously, he doesn't listen to anything that we do. We hear that the buses are full, some of them. Nobody's going to take transit because it's not, it's not reliable anymore. They'll go by you. They'll pass you because they're too full. And what do these technocrats do? They cut service. They needed to increase service, but they cut service. Because the whole system is set up wrong. It's just another industrial complex meant to soak the public out of money.
This pandemic hit, it seemed like maybe TriMet was starting to turn a corner a little bit on getting ridership to come back a little bit, thanks to some of the service enhancements and added frequency and whatnot from the 2017 state legislative package. Can you talk a little bit about what gains you were seeing? And it's got to be a little bit frustrating to have this happen right as that was potentially poised to see, a little bit more people riding buses and rails.
Yeah, well, contrary to some of the historic myths that were out there that ridership has been down, in fact,
Okay, here's TriMet. Where's the fucking board meeting? It's not there. Wait, here's 8. Where's 9? Well, this just happened. Give them a little time. Maybe they'll put it up. But if you're listening to me, you get that fucking up there, man. Or I'll have to do a public records request. I want to hear the general manager's report. And I do like to listen to the testimonies. What is this? What is this? Hold on.
The second phase of the Gresham Max Improvements Project will encompass signal work, crossing work, and structure work.
Oh, more reasons to not ride TriMet right now. Now they have you going on a shuttle bus. I mean, can you make it more miserable for people? What do they got here?
We're
What
going to be
is
doing
that?
structural upgrades and repairs to the bridge.
The wooden
Last
bridge?
spring, we were able to do some underside work
Jesus, look at
with
that.
additional new
Looks like something I could
timbers.
put together.
During the closure in October, we're going to be doing the topside work. So we'll be removing rails, removing ties.
Look at this. Jesus. All right. Oh, God. There's no board. We'll give them another week.
COVID. In fact, ridership has been up by, I can't remember the exact number of months in a row, but it's like 6+. So yes, the turnaround was coming, and that's attributed to a number of things. We've been looking to speed the system up. We're looking to be more reliable, and we've gone from 75% on-time performance in terms of meeting the schedule to in the 90s now. So
90s?
There's some changes we've had to make, but there's it's frustrating, but this is also the market conditions we face, whether they're controlled or not, and we have to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure when the riders or our customers are ready, that we're ready. So yeah, we were putting more service out on the street. We are working on the Division Transit project for $175 million. That's still going on.
Okay,
we're working on the Red Line extension, which would be new cars going out to Fairplex, double tracking to the airport. That's about $206 million. So there's a lot of things we've still got in the pipeline that are going to help us. But there's also, because of the health issue we are all facing, we've got to make sure that people trust us. And so that's one of the reasons we really took a bold move, probably the first in the United States, to actually put and commit to putting masks on the system for all of our rail and buses, as well as hand sanitizer.
Yeah, they were first. That's true. But the other ones followed right behind them. And other countries were on that way ahead of TriMet. I mean, it's standard practice in other countries in Europe and Asia. But, America, we're exceptional. We don't do that here.
Sanitizers. And this is in addition to all the cleaners, trying to get to every 4 hours as best we can, depending on how schedules run. So if people don't feel they can trust us or don't feel safe, then there's a high probability they're going to be less willing to come. So we've got to take care of those things. And then as we add service back, and it will come back. I'm very optimistic it will come back. It's going to take some time, but we've got to be ready to do our part first. So I think some of the ridership is, you and I are just talked about, are a lot more people working from home.
Right.
And so some of those folks may not be 5 days a week going forward. They may be 2 or 3. But there also may be, with the economy and such, there may be people who have the privilege and the luxury of taking their car who may go, you know what, I'm going to take transit now. So I think there's new markets that we're going to have to reposition ourselves to.
New markets? Oh, God, Jesus. Oh, just not what I want to hear.
Well, some make changes, like working from home. We may see less of those in the short term. So
what they need to do is get that service back to the way it was. I don't care how they do it. For example, get rid of that stupid light rail ballot measure and change it to let's get transit back to where it was measure. But they're not going to do that because they're criminals. They don't care about you. They care about filling pockets. If that thing goes through, the technocracy, the construction people, the entire consultant class continues to make 6-figure salaries off of it. And hopefully people won't pass that shit. But people are stupid. They don't realize they're giving their money to the enemy, and they're doing it. I think they're doing a good job. And I don't think it's far-fetched to think that most people do think TriMet's doing a good job. I think it's quite reasonable assumption. I mean, look at the politics nationally. 40% of the people of this country think Trump is doing a good job. So as a corollary to that, is it unreasonable to assume that 50% or more of the Portland area voters think TriMet is doing a good job. Yes, it's completely reasonable because people are stupid and easily fooled about these things. They're basically sheep. I mean, you can see what's going on around us, and people are all, there's no pushback at all on any of it. Everybody's deluded or not. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand why the billionaire class has stolen $50 trillion and nobody cares. Nobody cares, apparently.
We're trying to look at the short, medium, and longer term. And things like e-bikes, instead of people talk about the last mile, I think e-bikes are an amazing addition to healthy ways of getting around. So I think we'll be looking at the last miles, plural. So the range of how you can key into
wait a
the
minute,
network.
Stop for a minute. Just look at this here. All right. They don't have, wait a minute, fiscal year, this must be changed. I don't know, I can't. They must have changed.
Well, actually, I think it's going to grow over time really nicely. So there are changes in the markets that we're going to have to adapt and modernize. We're looking, for example, as a headset tour, using transit to allow people to use it as an educational tool. So if you're taking the Orange Line, for say, and on your left-hand side is the submarine. On a clear day, you can see Mount Hood and use it as an educational tool and a tourist tool on non-peak times when we have ridership capacity available. So things like that we're looking at in addition to loyalty programs.
Oh, yeah. No.
I'm curious, Doug, I've heard you talk in the last couple of years.
Here we go with this nonsense again. This is, this kind of thinking is really ass backwards. Loyalty program. Fuck. Why don't you provide reliable, frequent transit? That's how you get people to ride. And that's not what you're doing right now.
Years a lot about kind of studying where the ridership went and whether it was whether it's just people moving to town and driving, or people taking ride hailing services like Uber and Lyft more, or what have you. But I'm wondering if you go back to, if you look at ridership figures from 2005, more people in the metro area were riding buses and trains then than they were kind of in 2018. Why is that? How do you explain that, kind of eroding over time?
Yeah, as you know, I wasn't here in 2005, but
right.
Or through the recession 2008. What I can say is when I see this region and this, I'll call mobility marketplace now. I can't go back in time, but I could compare to where other regions in the world that I've had the privilege of working around. And we have about 4% transit market share for the private sector, or modal share. What that means for your listeners are, of all the trips in the region, about 4% are on transit, max, bus, etc.
Okay, 4%.
And so I think we have...
So you have 4% of all trips on transit. So 96% are not.
A lot of unfinished business here. We still have capacity on our rail and bus networks, in addition to adding new capacity post-COVID. But I also think we have to change policies. This region needs to start to tilt the playing field to take advantage of the really important urban growth boundary that was put in place here many years ago, to have queue jumper lanes. So if a bus pulls up next to a line of cars, the bus goes first,
right?
In many cultures of the world. So
why isn't that in there? Why is this not already happening? I never did understand why. I mean, even at Beaverton Transit Center, if you're coming in off the Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and you're making a left into that transit center, you don't even get a priority signal there. You're last. You can wait for 5 minutes of that light to get in there. Why is that? We've been talking about that for as long as I've been doing this stuff, 20 years.
We've got to start tilting the playing field to give advantage to healthy forms of mobility. We need to take advantage of transit-oriented development. People are, real estate prices have gone up. Real estate interest rates have been at some of the historic lows. So a lot of people have moved outside high real estate places or can't afford them at all. So that's where I think transit-oriented development is a recalibrator of higher real estate
That's
prices.
dead.
Right next to transit. And
Nobody
I'm working on
wants
one
that
right now
anymore.
with our
COVID
team
killed
on
all that.
the Hollywood
But
Transit
they're going
Center,
to keep
maybe.
pumping it up, of course.
So instead of having a piece of land, a bus comes in, why don't we consider selling the land, putting 6, 7 stories on there, and those are actually, the crime goes way down. Our costs get taken out of the business, and those people become long-term riders that may not need a car. So I think there's a whole lot of those kind of things we've got to change in the policy side, and we also need to come up with more products. The price of cars, the barriers to entry to owning a car through the largest stock market increase in history that we've been going through is the barriers to owning a car are pretty low.
How much I get there?
And so and fuel prices have now gotten low. So I think comparatively, those have been some of the challenges. So when you put them all together, it's a complex web of we've got to rewire how we do what we do and increase our frequency on our services. That's the number one request we get from our customers in our surveys is, in fact, want more service, want more of it, and more frequency. They like what we're doing, but they want more of it.
So do you think the whole wheel and spoke system of transit, where people coming into downtown from the suburbs, is that still a reality?
When I look at cities like London, Singapore, Copenhagen, and others, you cannot have it. But part of what we're going through is the region, and we're a mid-sized region, Dallas or Denver ourselves. Right. We're not New York or other ones or Paris who've had major investments underground, big fast trains and buses. So I think we're going through changes right now where it's going to be more like the old, I'm aging myself by saying this, like pickup sticks. People aren't just, they aren't just having to work in the central business district anymore. They may actually travel. I know examples where people live in Troutdale and actually work out in Hillsborough. So I think the travel patterns are changing. And technology's got a part of that. But to say you don't need a central business district model only, I think you need that and you need the suburban mix. Most cities, from my own experience, Andrew, have actually done a pretty good job in the central business district. You can walk, you can cycle, you're in close proximity because that's where a lot of things intersect.
Right.
The challenge is the further out you get, the wider the gap on the spokes, if you will, on your tire of the region. And as people move on those outside patterns, that's where I think further investment is going to be needed and further policy changes where we can get ahead of it rather than it's all densified and it's too late and too expensive to make those changes.
I know you weren't here during these times, but I covered the city of Hillsborough 8 years ago, and there's a discussion then about having more north-south routes to connect to South Hillsborough, the future development there, and Cornelius Pass, and some of the Intel campuses, and it's been almost a decade, and we haven't seen those level of investments.
Right.
Yeah, it's always follow the money, right? So through the great wisdom of House Bill 2017 that you referenced earlier on, it became approximately pre-COVID a $50 to $55 million projection of expanded service and programs. So to give us a bit of a kickstart, that's not the...
Yeah, House Bill 2017 was a tax grab that voters had no say on. Your fucking leaders shove that down your throat. And they're going to do that with the light rail, too, if you don't approve it. You watch.
And that because the region, I think, has to get, personally, with these policy changes plus investments, has to get to double-digit modal share. I think it's very important.
We're at 4% right now?
I think it's like 4.1%, Andrew, but let's call it 4% for this conversation. Okay. So the base here is really just excellent. And the four mothers and fathers before us have done a really nice job laying this network out. But we're not finished yet. And then we have to overlay not just capital, rebar, and investments. We have to overlay programs and services like our hop card so people can plan, book, pay, and minimize the, I call, frictions of getting around on public transit.
What a bunch of baloney.
And connect from transit to maybe an e-bike to a scooter and different combinations of things of healthy living. And if we can network all that and integrate that together.
Your job is to provide fucking transit, okay? Not the other shit. That's the problem with what happened with TriMet. They stopped being a transit agency and started all this other crap.
Then they can see the net cost, the net travel time, and then they become in control. So that's one of the reasons for me, the mindset for this region has to move from a transit mindset to a mobility mindset. Transit can't solve everybody's problems.
Nobody can solve everybody's problem. Well, he's just bullshitting, isn't he? This is his bullshit stuff here.
So it's part of the solution, but it's not the solution.
Let's take a break and come back and talk a little bit more with Doug Kelsey, General Manager of TriMet.
No. Hurry up. Come on.
Doug, there's a very significant ballot measure coming up in November, and I know you can't specifically talk about the measure itself, but there's a 11-mile light rail extension to Bridgeport Village that is kind of the centerpiece of this project. And I know you weren't around when this is on the books, but this project has been on the books for a long time. Why is this something that TriMet has looked to for really decades at this point? Why has it been highlighted as something that is worth pursuing?
Well, yeah, I as you mentioned up front, I said I think just for your listeners, since the ballot has been dropped, I'm legally not in a position to advocate for or against this. So as a public servant, if you will. So now that we're in this ballot, I have to be very careful. It's, by 2035, there's going to be 70,000 people are projected to be there in this area where this line is. This is about 10% of the region's populations, Andrew. So it's only logical that you lay the facts out that there would be significant policy interest in like the 2040 plan, and your listeners can find this, getmoving2020.org for all those details that get into the underpinnings of it. But the facts of the matter are this is a growing part of the region.
Okay, so what happens if voters don't approve the Get Moving package, the transportation package that includes billions for the light rail line?
Yeah, well, I think one of the other facts I think is important in the T2020 ballot is $975 million allocated to this. Mm-hmm. So if November 4th comes up, and it will, if you've indicated it is not successful, the project will not advance. It will not move forward. The next step after that is we'll have to take a pause and then consult with all the partners who've been at the table all this way, and determine what are the appropriate next steps. But if it is unsuccessful, it will not advance.
When you talked about a short-term, medium-term, long-term plan for the agency, I guess given kind of the flexibility that you talked about and that people desire so much in their daily lives, is TriMet's long-term future tied to buses or to light rail?
Well, I think, it's each one solves a different problem. I learned a long time ago from one of my mentors, buses are kind of like the Army. They're very nimble and flexible. The light rail is like the Navy or the big aircraft carriers. It takes a lot of investment, a lot of capital to move it around. But they perform fundamentally and complementary different kinds of services that they feed into each other. If you're in the private sector, you would never fly a Boeing 747 airplane when a Dash 8 or 737 can do the trick. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to look at what problem are we trying to solve, short, medium, and the more the capital, the more the permanent the infrastructure is, then you want to look at that long-term ridership capability. And so different tools of technology solve different problems. And even within bus or rail, you have different growth. You have smaller shuttle buses, you have 30-foot buses, we have 40-foot buses, we have something called the accordions, the articulated buses.
Right.
And then you go to the same thing with rail. Commuter rail is different than light rail. I ran the largest automated light rail system in the world in Vancouver, British Columbia. And that capacity can handle a lot more than light rail, but it's less than subway. So each one is a stair step as to what problem you're trying to solve. Or problems. Usually there's more than one. It's complex. And I think that's part of what we're looking at is making sure we look at whether we look at the I-5 bridge, what kind of technology is needed over an I-5 bridge, bus or train, and all the emotions that went with that years ago. So I'm agnostic personally to technology generally. At some point you'll lock into some general themes because it gets so costly to carry so many different types of vehicle types.
You mentioned your former employer up in Vancouver, BC, at TransLink. Now that you've been away from there for 5 years now, right?
Yeah, about 5 years, coming up on 5.
What do you think they do well? Because their mode split up there is significantly higher for transit than down here in the Portland metro area.
Well, there's not right or wrong. These are different choices, and there's different cultures in each. Part of the conversation in this region, i.e. the 2040 plan, is laying out what are the policy changes that need to happen to enable transit and mobility to really be optimized. So we went, when I was there, from about 6% modal share, slightly higher than here at 4%. And by the way, each percentage points is a lot of work. And we ended up around 12%. And it's a reflection, not so much of the modal share per se, but it's a reflection of use. And that it works for people in their lives. So frequency, the pursuit of frequency, speed, and reliability and comfort throughout the different parts and dynamics of the community is, to me, very important. So they've done a really good job on that. I think the base here is really, really nice, that the MAX system in particular is just an excellent base to go from. So they've done well on the policy and the pursuit of that policy, like London and neither of us in Vancouver, BC, or here, are close to say what some of the European cities doing. Like Stockholm,
not even New York, 50% ridership.
44% modal share. Yeah. London 42.
New York City, 50%.
Cycling kicks in, like we saw in Copenhagen, and so I am so optimistic that the steps that are being taken in the contemplations here, and overlaying technology with plan, book, pay, smart cards, all these things add up to to leverage this urban growth boundary, which most places don't have.
Talking nonsense here.
That is a precious gift to really densify. So I think the conditions are really exciting here, frankly.
So TriMet obviously depends on payroll tax revenue as well as passenger fare to pay the bills. But how much of your optimism going forward is contingent on continued state support, other additional revenue sources perhaps, and federal support?
Well, it's foundational. We look at in fact, I personally like diversity of revenue streams rather than all or one. Mm-hmm. I've seen many of my CEO or general manager counterparts of the country who are solely on sales tax. You'll live or die by that sword. So I learned.
What's the difference, man? You live or die by any tax, okay? There's no difference. It's the same. You live or die by the payroll tax, okay? You live or die by the fucking fare box. What's he talking about?
Many years ago, diversity of revenue streams is actually really helpful. It helps absorb the drop when they happen.
There is no diversity. It's all from the public. All the revenue streams are from the public in one sense or another. It should be out of the fare box and should be part of the regular. You should pay that on a property tax or should be part of a general income. I don't know, but it shouldn't be a fare box. I'm a big supporter of fare free.
It's inevitable at some points. So you don't follow as far typically. So I think there is a role for the state. There's absolutely a role for the user. I think it's going to be very interesting, this federal election that is upon us, and the role of the reappropriation of transit at the federal level. That's due up, I think, in the next year or two, around the billions literally being allocated to help fund transit authorities just like ourselves. Examples being Division Transit for just under about $90 million from the FTA. They've been great partners for us, really great. We just got a grant for them for $1.2 million for looking at pushing mobility options.
The Division project is completely pork. Doesn't benefit anybody. It's pork. All right? That's all it is.
With some joint ventures. So you start to look at the red line for, it's already been tweeted out that we're going to proceed on that for just a project.
Yeah, why? Why are they bothering with this better red nonsense? The ridership is down by half, and they're going to continue this shit? It's a criminal organization.
So that's a really important part.
It's not. It's wasteful.
Transit is expensive by its nature, and so therefore most revenue streams individually can't carry it. So I think I support diversity.
Of course they can. I mean, the military-industrial complex is supported by taxpayer money 100%. Nobody ever talks about that, do they? I've had enough of his nonsense cut.